Faces of Stone is sort of live and ready to talk to you for episode 8 of our 2019 Star Wars series. To begin with, let's meet our Faces of Stone panel. First, a smuggler with a price on his head so big he can't go near a civilized system. Marc-Anthony Macon.
Sometimes you just gotta jettison your cargo. Hey, everybody.
Hey.
Next, she always travels single file to hide her numbers. The Amandalorian, Amanda Sisk.
Hello. Hello. I'm very sneaky.
And my name is Noah Diamond. Well, this is it. We have finally reached, in our chronological rewatch of the Star Wars films, the first, which is to say fourth film in the Star Wars series. But before we progress with our conversation about Episode 4, A New Hope, there's a little bit of Star Wars breaking news this week, and we thought we would chew on that for a little while first. I'm talking specifically about 2 trailers that have come out just since our last Faces of Stone episode 2 weeks ago, namely the trailers for The Mandalorian and Rise of Skywalker, the second trailer for Rise of Skywalker. So let's take those in the order we saw them, which I think is the Mandalorian trailer first. Amanda, moments ago, you saw this trailer for the first time, right?
I did.
Just before we started this. So what are your very fresh impressions?
You know, I thought it looked a lot like a Game of Thrones trailer or just a war movie trailer. It made me excited. It was fine. I thought, oh, I'll watch this. I'll definitely watch it. Did I freak out or anything? I don't remember. No, I mean, it was good. It looked good. I like that it's Mandalorian because I'm a Mandalorian. As long as it's about me, I'm good.
What about you, Marc-Anthony? Did that trailer do anything for you?
Oh, that trailer did lots for me. I mean, for one thing, I just want to point out that the weapon that the Mandalorian is using in this trailer is the weapon that Boba Fett was using in the Christmas special, the holiday special. So it was the first time we saw Boba Fett, he was using that kind of weapon. So it's really a wonderful wink there. And also, yeah, I mean, this looks like a great angle to attack Star Wars with. I'm pretty excited about it.
My feeling was, it looks fine. I mean, I'm not going to judge the series based on the minute and a half of footage that's in the trailer. And I've heard Jon Favreau talk about this series in interviews and stuff, and it does sound interesting. On the basis of just this trailer, though, I don't know. It actually didn't get me that excited. I just thought, like, oh, okay, maybe that'll be good. I mean, this series will test a theory of mine, which is that I don't know how interested I'm going to be in stuff that is set in the Star Wars universe, but not connected to the legacy characters or the main thrust of the Skywalker saga. I don't know. I mean, I suppose I might be, and maybe it'll just be more on the individual merits of each piece, since it won't be tied in as deeply to the story I've been following since, infancy. I don't know. I didn't think it looked bad. I thought it looked like a competently made sort of action story set in the Star Wars universe. I also don't have that much of a Boba fetish. I think he's fine. He's an interesting character, but I've never quite understood the passionate love.
I really don't think he is an interesting character, and that's why I think he's been so popular, because he's just a mass. You can inject anything you want into him. And,
that's true.
You have that toy, you can make Boba Fett whatever or whomever you want.
Yeah.
I remember being very disappointed because, the braids that hang on Boba Fett on his shoulder.
Wookiee scalps?
That's I think what was the rumored answer to that for the longest time. And apparently someone said that to Lucas and he said, I never said they were Wookiee scalps. And then there was a time when the prequels were coming out where people were saying they were Padawan braids.
Oh.
Because he had collected them. But I always hoped it was just braids and it was a woman under there.
I think Amanda Sisk might be having connection problems. I'm sure she will return momentarily.
Come back to us, Amanda.
Yeah, I mean, I don't feel down on The Mandalorian. I'm sure it has, there's at least a very good chance that it'll be quite good. But there was nothing about the trailer that made me kind of stand up and cheer.
I mean, I guess this sort of seems like the kind of Star Wars that a lot of the older fans have been wanting. They have kind of wanted a more, gritty, rough kind of Star Wars. I do think people want Star Wars that's like Game of Thrones. I think there are some people that really want that. And that's not anything I really feel like I need to have, but I'll watch it and enjoy it if that's what it is.
Uh-huh. All right, then. And that's November, I think, that Mandalorian series premieres on a streaming service. Right now, I don't know anyone who has it, but I imagine everyone I know will have it in the next few months. And then we also got a second trailer for Rise of Skywalker, although this trailer, which was shown at the D23 Disney celebration, most of it is actually...
May I interrupt for a moment? I was having internet troubles during that entire conversation, so I didn't hear anything of it.
We were just completely silent the whole time you were gone.
I know, you add respect.
But
bowed
our heads
I forgot to explain bingo, which is if every time one of these guys or anytime one of these guys says something I've written on pre-written for here, I ring a bell and I hold it up and it's a bingo. So I wrote something down today that I wrote down before I saw the Mandalorian trailer. And I need to know if anybody said this because it's ridiculous that I would have written it down. I wrote that down before I saw the trailer.
That is remarkable.
Yeah.
Did anybody say it?
I meant to mention Carl, but I forgot. So
yeah, I didn't say it.
Could have happened. Maybe had you not, abandoned us, I would have remembered.
Or maybe I sucked it out of your head and wrote it on that piece of paper. Regardless, that's really weird.
Yes,
you take a Wookiee scalp, you throw it in a pot, you've got a stew going.
I almost had you got a stew going. Anyway.
So the Rise of Skywalker.
Oh, honestly, before we move on to the Rise of Skywalker,
yes.
Could we mention the one other little snippet of news, which is that it seems that they are moving forward on the Kenobi series as well, and that this is going to be set at about the same time as Solo, which is what I was told. So I guess that leaves the possibility of Darth Maul being involved.
Yeah,
and Lando.
That's true. Yes, it's been confirmed by Kathleen Kennedy and Ewan McGregor at the same D23 Expo that all the scripts have already been written for a season of the Obi-Wan Kenobi, the as yet untitled series, which I'll bet it's going to be called Kenobi.
I imagine that too. I'm hoping it's, there's an exclamation point. I'm hoping it's Kenobi! Kenobi! Like that's how he entertains himself on Tatooine when he's not spying on Luke. He's joined this dance troupe. And, his Jedi reflexes make him the star dancer.
Of course. He can guess when someone's going to leap into his arms.
He knows
before it happens.
Yeah, he can see pliés before they happen. It's true.
Yeah.
I think, exploring Obi-Wan's, exile period on Tatooine with Ewan McGregor playing the role, I'm see that.
Yes, please.
That is an automatic sell for me because it ties deeply in with the stories I know and love. And, it occurred to me, there's also at least the possibility of seeing Liam Neeson return to the role of Qui-Gon because Obi-Wan is supposed to be learning how to commune with Qui-Gon's Force ghost during this period. Mm-hmm. That would be something, wouldn't it?
I would, I'll take it. Yes, please.
And I suppose, yes, anyway. We don't need to even talk about Jar Jar Binks right now. Why even open that up?
I'm gonna bring Jar Jar up just because I'm hoping, all the things that I want to see in the final episode in Rise of Skywalker. Just please give me Jar Jar.
I would actually be all respect if they found some way to to come by it honestly. If they could organically get there.
There is apparently the last Jar Jar was heard of in canon that we know of. He was a jester on Coruscant. Like a street performer jester.
During the Empire period?
No, I think after, up to Return of the Jedi, maybe somewhere around there. He was, so I could see a jester Jar Jar scene. I don't care.
Do Gungans have roughly the same life expectancy as humans?
I don't know. I don't know how long Liv Gungan's on.
That would be interesting to know. If, like, by Return of the Jedi era, is Jar Jar like an elder statesman of comedy?
Maybe they find out that really he was a toddler. They had no idea.
Yeah. Right.
He starts speaking, and he's like, "Oh, actually."
Yeah. Suddenly, he's really eloquent.
Yeah.
Okay, so now Rise of Skywalker.
Right. What'd you think, M.A.?
I mean, I saw nothing in that trailer to anger me. There's certainly that, which, I'm prepared to be angered by something in this movie, but maybe JJ will come through in a way that I like. And there was a lot to like in that trailer, and a lot to go about.
What's your hot take, Amanda Sisk?
I've seen it twice now, and I just watched it for the second time, and so I'm still just reacting completely emotionally. But I watched it this time around, and at the very end when it stopped, as soon as she puts that lightsaber down, I just went "fuck" and ran out of the room. So I don't know, that's how I feel about it.
The first time, I think our viewers at home should know, the first time Amanda Sisk watched the new Rise of Skywalker trailer, she was watching it on a mobile phone, and when that happened, when Rey's lightsaber clicked into the double-bladed position, she dropped the phone. She went, "Oh shit," and dropped it.
I forgot about that. Yes, I totally forgot about it. I'm like, I've got no short-term memory. You can just keep showing me this trailer, and I'll just keep doing stupid shit.
I thought it was, among other, I feel the same way. It looks great. I thought the trailer was very exciting, and all the new footage made me even more interested to see the film. But it's so smart. I almost resent the brilliance of the marketing rollout of all this, this trailer is so clearly, so much of the footage in that trailer was from the original trilogy, and then a sort of obligatory revisitation of the prequels.
Yes, this too. Yes.
And it's so interesting that you would think that trailer might have presented the clips chronologically in order to say 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, and now we're doing 9. But they clearly knew that if they had started this trailer with footage from the prequels, a certain contingency within the audience would have gotten up and walked out. So no, we have to start with Luke and the twin sons of Tatooine and go in release order. Anyway, the new footage, it all looks fantastic. It confirms things we already know, like that Palpatine is going to be a part of this.
So here's the thing. I've heard dissent amongst people as to whether that is Ian McDiarmid or if that is someone affecting, doing an imitation of him.
Oh.
I was thinking that just now. When we saw the trailer, I was like, is this really him or is it somebody doing him?
I accepted it as him, but I'll concede it could be somebody else. But we do know he was on the set.
He was on the set, and at all of the kind of Comic-Con panels and things that he's been at when it's been raised, he's given a very coy answer that seems pretty much like, my NDA says I can't say anything, Yeah. So it seems pretty likely, and his face is on the new poster. Although
yes,
it looks weirdly animated. It doesn't look like the Emperor as we've seen him before. But now, of course, one of the predominant theories as to why that isn't Ian McDiarmid is that it's actually Matt Smith who is playing one of the Knights of Ren that Palpatine inhabits and takes over this. All the fanboys are really onto Palpatine's spirit and what it's getting into. They want it to be in the Death Star. They want it to be in Kylo Ren. They want it to be in Rey. They want that to be the sluttiest little spirit.
Has it been confirmed that is the plot device, Palpatine's spirit inhabiting?
As far as I know, it has not been confirmed, but people seem to.
For me, because I don't like knowing anything.
I know. Sorry. Yeah.
But I could not listen.
We actually, this is something we were always going to have to talk about at some point. As we get closer to the Rise of Skywalker, one of the functions of this series will be to discuss our anticipation of that movie and some of the news as it breaks leading up to it. But yeah, we should decide on a spoiler policy both for ourselves and for our audience, so people know what they're getting into. You know, I think the three of us, you know, have different ideas about spoilers and how we feel about them. But as always with spoilers, we must honor the wishes of the most restrictive people so that it's not spoiled for them.
Right. So at least we should say now there's theoretical spoilers ahead.
Exactly.
If you don't even want to think about what's going to happen, you've got to put your fingers in your ears.
And you also can't read anything or turn on the television or look at the internet.
Well, and you know, like, this is the thing, like, my boyfriend is really mad that he tries to avoid spoilers and trailers at all costs, and he just saw, like, a clip of Rey with the lightsaber, and he's very angry.
Oh, really?
He's very angry, especially because, like, for him, movies like Star Wars are really fun, but especially the weapons are fun. He's really into, you know, what weapons people have, and he's like, this ruined a major thing for him that he wanted to have surprised in the sequence it was supposed to have.
Very often with that stuff, I'm not challenging his or anybody's personal feelings about how much they want to know or not know going in. I mean, whatever makes you happy. But very often those moments in the trailers turn out to be misdirects anyway.
Yeah,
like, to us, since we've never seen that weapon before, that seems like that must be the point of that moment. But there's every possibility that that moment comes, that's about something else, and we already know all about that lightsaber, or
that moment isn't even in the freaking movie. That happens all the time.
Yeah, that does. Yeah.
In the trailer for The Last Jedi, you see Rey saying, "I need somebody to show me my place in all this," and then you see Kylo Ren with his hand outstretched. And I thought, ooh, she says that to him. But in the movie, she says that to Luke. And it's been edited to, you know, anyway. Personally, just in case anyone at home is wondering about my feelings about spoilers, I want them. Bring them on. If I could read the screenplay before seeing the movie, I would.
I think that you guys should just, as you let the audience know there are going to be spoilers, I understand there are going to be spoilers as well. So, because you guys can talk about stuff that you've heard. That's part of why we're here.
Well, I think I might be if I'm reading this correctly, Marc-Anthony, you're somewhere between Amanda and me, right? You're following news when it breaks, but you don't really want to know too much.
Right. Yeah, that sounds about right.
Well, maybe what we should just say is we will restrict our episode 9 discussion to news that is not directly about plot points in the movie.
We have an entire episode about what we think is going to happen, so I might as well just hear the spoilers. Well,
predictions are different from spoilers, though.
But if you predict something because of some big fan, you know, thing you've read. Anyway, let's move on. I'll just run out of the room screaming.
Okay.
Marc-Anthony, you mentioned in an off-the-air conversation, we do know each other in real life, folks, that you thought the Tantive 4 was seen in this trailer?
Well, I mean, it's definitely the same kind of ship.
In which clip?
When all of the Rebel ships are coming out of hyperspace, one of them is the Tantive 4, or at least it has the exact same silhouette as that kind of ship. It's definitely a Corellian Corvette blockade runner. So I don't see why it wouldn't be that, especially considering a lot of what Abrams and crew is saying is, like, we really want to, like, you know, tie up and call back to all the great things from Star Wars, and that ship has been a major part of several of the movies now.
Yeah, George Lucas revived it in Episode 3 for that same reason, to give us a connection with Episode 4, and of course Rogue One almost ends on. Well, it does end on that.
It does end with it, yeah. And Episode 4 that we're about to talk about begins with it, so it's a ship that kind of ties some things together in a fun way. So why not throw it in there? And in fact, all of the ships in that little, you know, coming from hyperspace scene are classic ships from the original trilogy. There's B-Wings and A-Wings. And the same thing with the Star Destroyers. Those are, you know, classic Imperial Star Destroyers. They're not New Order. No,
and just the silhouette you can recognize because they're so classic. And when they all pop in and you just kind of see the shapes, you don't even see it's scary. Like, it scared me. I thought, oh my God, we don't have enough manpower.
Yes.
And, you know, like, I'm really not usually that, well, no, I am that rah-rah about things like that. I really got scared that there was nothing we are going to be able to do.
It's ominous, a sky full of Star Destroyers.
Yeah. And, you know, I just started watching college football again. So I'm kind of feeling this way. Like, we can't do anything. We can't do anything. It's over already. So.
Their armor's too strong for our blasters.
Yes.
Well, any thoughts about the Rise of Skywalker, or either of these new trailers, or any other current Star Wars headlines before we dive back to 1977?
Why don't we? Oh, go ahead, Amanda.
I think Adam Driver's hair has gone back a step and is a little more feathered in this one. I think they went back to 7 with his hair a little bit. That's what I predict.
Mm. Yeah, I think that might be true.
It's just a new product, really.
Good conditioner.
Mm-hmm.
Were you going to say something before I made my epiphany about his hair?
No, I was saying let's move on to New Hope.
All right. Well, this is a very interesting movie, my friends. This may be the movie that I've seen more times than any other movie, mostly because of an incredible number of times between the ages of, 0 and 12. I mean, it is so familiar. Every frame of it is familiar in a way that I guess no other movie is, because there's no other movie that I started on this early, this young. I think the first Muppet movie actually might be comparable in terms of, like, it is burned in there. So, I mean, I can close my eyes and watch it, So I tried to watch it in preparation for this discussion. Amanda and I have put it on, I guess, 3 times in the last week, and I've seen parts of it 3 times in the last week and other parts of it once, But I've been trying to look at it with fresh eyes and imagine what it's like to see for the first time now, but even more so what it was like in 1977 to see this movie in a world that had no Star Wars in it. And I think viewed through that lens, particularly, it is an endlessly interesting movie, just trying to figure out what a human brain was like before it had Star Wars crammed into it for 40 years. Because this movie is the seminal film that began all of this for all of us, I mean, those of us who are old enough to have really started with episode 4. And so my general thoughts about it are more complicated and more personal than my general thoughts about any of the others. What do you guys think? What are your general feelings about this movie?
Well, I mean, to echo a bit of what you said, I feel like, my very first memory is C-3PO going, "Don't shoot, don't shoot." Like, that's the very first thing I can remember. So surely that has, colored my personality and political opinions ever since. And it is like a thing that it's hard not to feel like you're a kid watching this, because it is so indelibly scratched into my brain. I feel that way too. Like, it's something that's very, very close to my heart and, indelibly there.
Amanda, do you have early memories of seeing this when you were just a wee thing?
No. I remember seeing Return of the Jedi, and with my family and my sister and everything. But I don't remember the first time I saw anything before that. And I actually got to know, I'm sorry, I'm choking on a mint. I actually got to know it because later on in high school, really, middle school, high school, and college, because I hung around with geeks and male geeks, and that's what we did. We watched Transformers, the movie, the original one, and
the one where they had the word shit in the animated cartoon.
Oh
yeah. Oh man, it blew me away.
Oh my god, that was
I
hung out with you people.
Oh shit!
But
what
that
do we do
movie
now?
is that shit crazy. That is one of the weirdest movies ever. I mean, it's like, why don't we, take all the Transformers that these kids love, kill them all off, and then we'll have Orson Welles be a planet-eating planet.
I remember looking at my mother, tears streaming down my face, and I thought she didn't seem properly affected by the death of Optimus Prime.
Yeah, it's true.
He was the leader of the Autobots. And she said, I know.
Yeah. I also, no, I know exactly. I felt very betrayed by adults' cavalier attitude toward the death of Optimus Prime.
Uh-huh. Anyway.
It may be the closest I've ever been to, did you just take the Lord's name in vain? That's...
Yeah.
But yes.
So
back to...
So I watched it more. Yes, I hung out with you people equivalent to you, and we watched movies like that, and that's when I really got to start watching New Hope over and over and over again. They were re-released, and then I got to watch them in the theater, and oh, that's nice. And then I just watched them, and I have probably watched this one at least half the number of times you have, maybe a third. But I love it.
It's one thing about it that's interesting is how over time I had kind of developed a feeling about this movie that, you know, it's undeniably the seminal film that began this whole thing. It was a game changer, as we would now say, when it was first released. And it's a very exciting thrill ride. And part of the reason it was able to ignite this global phenomenon that continues today is because it is just such a damn fine, solid piece of excellent storytelling craftsmanship. You know, it moves beautifully, the characters are engaging, the actors are perfect, it's visually splendid, all that, undeniably true. However, since this movie came out, Star Wars has come to mean so much more than what is contained in this one film. Both the story and the legend around it have gotten so vast, you know, and that this movie has a kind of simplicity to it. It doesn't have the complexity and sophistication that we now associate with the saga in general. And therefore, you know, through no fault of its own, it does have a sort of simplistic, pedestrian quality to it. And yet, watching it over the last week a few times, I did not feel that way, except intellectually. I felt emotionally more like, oh, maybe this is the best of all these movies after all. Maybe this really is it. It is a fantastic, beautiful, entertaining, endlessly inventive, surprising, original film. It's better than I thought.
Noah, we watched Rocky recently, and this is kind of a parallel. I forgot, because I'm so into, like, you know, if he dies, he dies, and all those horrible, horrible parts of stupid Rockies, that I forgot this is a really good movie. I mean, it's really good.
There is no stupid Rocky. There is just a Rocky for every move.
There's no stupid Rocky. There's just Rocky with a bad teacher.
No,
I did the same thing with this movie. Was, you know, I forgot how good it is. It's really good, and I think both of these movies, like, were equivalent this past week of me realizing, oh my God, these aren't just things that I remember at the end, and like you said, they're simpler, but it's a standalone, and it's not, you know, this. I don't know.
I mean, episode 4, as we now call it, you know, it's missing an awful lot of specific things that seem absolutely crucial to Star Wars. It has no Yoda. It doesn't even have the Imperial March. We did not hear that until Empire Strikes Back. I mean, Star Wars, the movie, the original Star Wars, never has da 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 da. I'll bet almost everybody would be surprised to hear that, because you just think it.
I'm surprised.
Yeah. You know, it is like Star Wars goes from A to Z, but this movie only goes from A to like F. Nevertheless.
Well, even along those same lines, though, I mean, I think watching this, the one thing I felt stood out was that Vader doesn't really get to be Vader too much in it. It's really Empire Strikes Back where he comes into his own as a villain. And here he's threatening, but we don't really get as close a picture of him there to set up how threatening he is. This movie wouldn't have as much tension as it can.
It's true. Vader he doesn't seem as scary or powerful as he does later. On the other hand, This is our first glimpse ever of Darth Vader. And I think things that we now just are comfortable with, the sound of that breathing, or just the black mask with, you know, that unchanging skeleton face. Like, I think his very presence was far more terrifying then than we can really conceive of now.
Well, he does choke that guy. You see the first choke when the guy says you can't, and something about his sorcerer's ways.
Yes, I find your lack of faith disturbing.
Yeah.
So,
yeah.
Speaking of which, I find it really interesting how impressively and worryingly short the cultural memory in the Star Wars universe seems to be. Everyone's like, oh my God, you know, they're all talking about these knights that were here, like, you know, long, long ago, 30, 20 years ago. It was everyone in the galaxy has forgotten about them except for 5 people.
Yeah. Yeah, it's true. Although, as far as the effort to make the emerging storyline match this movie, that stuff is all pretty well done. I'm sure as we discuss this film, we'll talk about some of the moments that don't necessarily match up with what prequels and sequels insist upon. But you know, this whole opening sequence on the Tantive 4, you know, they really did such a good job matching it in Rogue One, but also in Episode 3. That it's very, I mean, there's something too about this sequence. Chris Taylor points out in How Star Wars Conquered the Universe that in that first glimpse of Vader when he comes down that hallway, and you see the close-ups of all the rebels awaiting his entrance, and none of them are young. They all look like these sort of middle-aged soldiers, you know, who have been in this fight for a long time. There's like a feeling of desperation about it.
I mean, it is a really well-done scene.
We get our first glimpses of the 2 droids. But it does go on for quite a while, the opening moments of this movie, before we ever see a human protagonist. And when we do, it's Leia, and she only has a few lines. The whole first reel.
Lucas was given a lot of shit about that when he was first presenting his script, as people were saying, George, it's like THX all over again. This is just like nothing's happening. It's just robots. No one cares about them.
Yeah.
I mean, okay, you boys, I want to hear how you felt about, because we just skipped over this. When the first shot, when you pan up and it flies over, and it's this thing kept going and going and going, and that's kind of a notorious event or a momentous event for so many people that showed this movie was different. Do you guys remember thinking this is crazy? Oh my God, look at that, or was it just?
I weirdly don't remember that from, you know, my reaction to that as a kid. Because the first time I saw it, I was like 3 years old, so I only remember a little bit, tidbits.
Same with me. I don't remember. I don't have like specific memories of on first viewing what I thought of things. I just have memories of like, oh, when I was a little kid, that moment really scared me. But it scared me over the course of repeated viewings. But yes, it is, I mean, of course, memorably spoofed at the beginning of Spaceballs, you know, the shot of the ship that, you know, first you see Leia's ship, the Tantive 4, and that's kind of exciting enough when this whole idea of this kind of movie is new. And then you're just kind of getting over how cool that is when it's pursued by this ship that seems to go on forever. We could even back up earlier and talk about the first opening crawl of any Star Wars movie. And as is generally known, when it was released in 1977, it was not Episode 4, A New Hope, or at least it wasn't explicitly such. It was added in 1981 when it was re-released. Mm-hmm. So the very first audience saw a long time ago in a galaxy far, far away, also the world premiere of a now immortal phrase that does seem particularly brilliant and astute to let us know right away, this isn't the future, you know, and this isn't, don't look for the ruins of the Statue of Liberty, you know, this is a made-up fantasy fairy tale. And then one of the best logos ever designed comes flying away from your face. And then we get this crawl, which later became an entire movie that we talked about last time, Rogue One.
I suppose, is that supposed to be a quote from the Journal of the Wills? Is that?
I think that's the idea, yeah.
Yeah. But I mean, it's a great device, and it really, you know, serves to set up your feelings about this. Like you're being plopped down in the middle of this thing, and you've got to figure out the world.
Yeah. Yes, it's
Like,
another counter.
You know, this is enough. You take this, and then we'll fill it up for you. But these are like the bones we're going to go ahead and give you.
Right.
And we'll understand it later. It's fine.
Yeah.
And it's also, you know, for a movie that largely was intended for and definitely captured the imaginations of little kids, there's tremendous, you know, social value in, all right, first, we're going to read. We're going to read a few paragraphs before we get to this movie.
Yes.
And so it's like, okay, guess we have to learn to read them.
Mm-hmm.
And it's another thing that I'm sure George Lucas insisted upon, because it's a kind of Flash Gordon reference. You know, the serials of the 30s that always had to catch you up with what happened in the previous episodes.
Right.
And I'm sure he was told not to do that. Also, the crawl, it's not just what the crawl itself is, but the crawl happens sort of in lieu of any opening credits.
And that really was totally against convention at the time.
Right.
Yeah. Yes, it's only a very small number of prestige films previous to this had foregone opening credits, and I think this led to a sort of permanent rift between Lucas and the Directors Guild, which insists upon, you know, has very regulated rules for how the credits have to be presented. He was absolutely right. This, you know, it is very important that you be in the world of this movie right from the start. And, you know, we don't want to hear about set decorators and, you know, Harrison Ford yet. We'll do it at the end.
Spoilers.
Yeah, right.
Oh, man, they told me Ralph McQuarrie designed the spaceships. Now I know kind of what they're going to look like.
Yeah, it's very subtle and delicate, but it's true in this movie, and given what the task that was set for this movie by its creators, yeah, somehow it does seem like opening credits reminding us that this is a movie in the world we know would be almost like pulling back and seeing the boom mics in the margins of the frame.
Mm-hmm.
Well, so the movie gets underway pretty quickly. We don't have to summarize every detail of the plot, but as everybody knows, it's all about these stolen plans to the Death Star, which Leia gives to R2, and R2 and C-3PO escape in that escape pod.
After which the guy says, "Oh, there's no life forms aboard. Hold your fire."
Yeah.
Like, you can't just go ahead. You'd shoot it, right? I mean, you know what? Let's go ahead and just, I don't know what's happening there, but just shoot it.
Yeah. We only have 20 bullets left, so.
And that has no life forms aboard. And also, they're droids. They're around droids all the freaking time.
Right.
It's not just like one person who's like, oh, it could have been a droid. And they're like, oh, shit, yeah, those things, I forgot about it.
I have droid blindness.
Exactly. These people are so stupid. Villains minions have to be so stupid in order for things to work. Which brings me to another thing that Noah Diamond pointed out. This is jumping way forward. It was when Alec Guinness says they always writes, only stormtroopers are this precise. To which Noah Diamond responded, they're not precise at all. They can't hit anybody. Like, they shoot and shoot and shoot, and they can't hit anybody.
Oh, I challenge that. I challenge that statement. I think most of the time when you see stormtroopers missing, it's when they've been instructed to miss. When they're supposed to actually let them get away with the thing on their, you know, so they can be tracked. They're not actually trying to hit them when they're missing those times.
I think in every movie it would be difficult to say that. I pick up half of what you're putting down.
Well, at least in this movie, I think you can say that they're letting them go. They're just giving them a chase.
That works for me, but I think, I mean, at no point, I mean, the stormtroopers are the evil army in these movies, and at no time in any of these films does a stormtrooper kill a character we care about. Is that right? Now that I'm saying it out loud, I'm questioning it. I think that's true, though.
Well, I mean, it's Rogue One.
Rogue One, okay, but okay.
Yeah, and all the clone troopers killed all the Jedi.
Yeah, but I was thinking of stormtroopers in the original trilogy when these conventions were established. I don't know. Yeah, I mean, when Obi-Wan and Luke find the wreckage of the Jawas sandcrawler, and we are meant. Luke says sand people must have been responsible for this, and Obi-Wan says, "No, that's what we're meant to think." But these tracks are single file. Sand people always ride single file, and only Imperial stormtroopers. My lightsaber gently weeps.
Can I just say that I think Look Sir Droids would be a pretty good band name? I would go at least some of their songs. See,
Would you keep the comma in? Would you say, "Look, sir, comma, droids"?
I debated that when I thought of it. I'm not positive. I think in the end, maybe yes. But I do kind of like Look Sir Droids as just one thing without there's something appealing about that.
It might be interesting if it was just one word.
Look Sir, oh yeah.
Look Sir Droid.
Mm-hmm.
Anyway. I thought Noah was coming in here to punish me, but
later, my dear. Well, when you watch this movie now, one thing that is impossible not to think about is the fact that you are, in all likelihood, watching the special edition, a version of the film or one of a number of versions of the film that began coming out in 1977. What we have is a DVD set. We're still watching the original trilogy on DVD, set that came out, I think, sometime in the early 2000s. The special editions... Yeah, go ahead.
So you may be seeing, because there are several special editions now. The most recent one, I think, was 2011.
We have an earlier one than that.
Okay, so that one... So we're watching different special editions.
Uh-huh.
Okay.
And what this is, Lucas kept going back and maybe making Jabba the Hutt look slightly better, maybe changing the timing a little bit on Han and Greedo, which I'm sure we will talk about again.
I was surprised, though, at how much this special edition seemed to change. First one, and Marc-Anthony, I don't know if it changed even further, but this, like Jennifer Aniston and that coffee shop, and they all had this.
Yeah.
Like, it was really weird.
It stands right out.
Yeah.
Yeah.
It's a brilliant test of CGI technology, but it's not Star Wars. I did have an experience recently. I saw on YouTube, I watched the original version of the cantina scene. Someone had posted the unspecial edition of the whole cantina scene. I thought, oh, that's interesting. So I watched that. And, yes, of course, there are big differences that we know about. But I was surprised by how little it really changed,
There's just a couple of substitutions that I really don't feel make that big of a difference. I mean, my feeling with that is kind of, well, I don't know why you did that, but okay.
Yeah, I mean...
It doesn't change much for me.
The version that we have, it's possible some of these shots look a little more convincing in more recent editions, but sometimes it takes you out of the film a little because it just doesn't look like the rest of the film. The scene with the land speeder arriving at Mos Eisley, there's a new shot in there. It's like a wide, long shot where you see the whole spaceport and the land speeder comes through, and it just looks it looks like computer animated footage from the early 2000s. So it fractures the reality of the movie a little bit. It's really hard.
But I guess I kind of have to say I would rather have the reality fractured in that way, which also does kind of make the whole series a little more cohesive, and that's one of the good elements of that, continuity from the prequels. But I would much rather have that kind of fracturing than there is a kind of gray cube around every TIE fighter where they cut out the cell from. That to me just looks, I don't know, worse.
Oh, I've never noticed that. Is that true?
Yeah, if you watch the original cut, that's what it's...
You mean in the unedited movie?
In the unedited.
Oh, yes. That stuff. I remember from when I was a little kid, we used to spot that stuff. Or you could kind of see that there was a mirror under the land speeder.
Right.
To me, those things, they didn't hurt my enjoyment of the movie a bit. In fact, if anything, they made it seem even cooler because there were little clues in the movie about how they did this stuff. And from repeated viewings, you absorbed all this trivia. Like, always thought that was interesting. But
I think that was definitely part of the fun at the time. I think for the sake of posterity, I kind of lean towards the special editions.
Mm-hmm. I don't have strong feelings about it. I really don't. I find it very impossible to dredge up the kind of outrage that some people feel
Yes.
about the special editions. But in general, change for change, the big noticeable changes, none of them are things I would fight for. Like, that had to be done. Nor do they bother me particularly. I think there is a kind of doodling in the margins quality to a lot of it that just can be distracting sometimes, you know, like Look Sir Droids is one of those moments. Like, you know, there's always a lot to take in that shot, and now there's a lot to take in plus 5 more dewbacks.
Yeah, you know, but I will never say no to dewbacks. You know, like if I go to a restaurant and you can get it with a side of dewback, I'm going to get it with a side of dewback. Just give me the big old horse lizard.
Give me the big old horse
lizard.
lizard.
So ecologically unfriendly, Marc-Anthony.
Mm. Well, Marc-Anthony uses every part of the dewback.
And boy,
you can really keep things like they will store for a long time in a dewback gallbladder. You can fill that with fruit or something.
Oh my god, no, we're done.
Okay.
I'll never eat
I want to point out one of the things I love about watching this movie is that you can kind of see how Anthony Daniels as C-3PO wound up shaping the character moving forward, because originally Lucas was kind of writing him as like an oily used car salesman kind of, you know, and you can tell in his dialogue in this film that that's what he's supposed to be, but instead you have this prissy voice coming along with it. And,
I really noticed his movements, I think, very closely this time. Or I watched them very closely, and knowing that he was doing this first and that they weren't planning on using his voice and that he was just moving. At first I thought, you know, geez, this guy's really skinny, which he is.
mm-hmm.
But then you just think, like, he really worked hard. And those movements are so precise, and
Mm-hmm.
you don't realize how good he is, and that makes it, you realize he's even better. You don't watch him work for it. He just does it, and it's so good. And he totally shaped that character just by the choices he made in movement.
Mm-hmm.
And they were so good, they had to keep his voice too. I mean,
yes, because you couldn't put like a Brooklyn accent over that.
No.
Although I would like to see that. I would like to see that cut.
With everybody with a Brooklyn accent, or just 3PO?
No, just nothing changed in the entire Star Wars mythos except every line by 3PO is a kind of, you know, like a mechanic from Brooklyn.
I think he should have talked like Truman Capote.
Wow.
I think also it's I feel even more appreciation of Anthony Daniels' work, having appreciated what Alan Tudyk and Phoebe Waller-Bridges have done with their droid performances in some of the later movies, you know, in Rogue One and Solo. You know, this is the genesis of all that, and a human playing a robot. And in Anthony Daniels' case, without the benefit of any performance capture or post-facto digital rendering, that is just a man packed in metal acting.
In the desert.
Yeah.
That's why when he
the
saw
desert
carpet, he yelled, "Fuck you!"
Yes.
Is there a line or two? What are there examples of lines of 3 that sound more like the earlier idea for the character?
I think especially when they first land on Tatooine, and you know, it's this. What is the line when they're fighting when they first get
some of the insults? You overweight glob of grease and that kind of thing.
Yeah.
Also, when he's selling himself to Uncle Owen,
Mm-hmm.
like, well, that's, you know, that could be my first. That's my first priority is being a protocol droid. And then they're like, yeah, well, I have no need. And he's like, well, of course I do this too, and I do that. Oh yes, I do that too. You know.
Mm-hmm. And that one's a real bargain.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah, a real bargain over there.
That's like language to me, you know.
Tatooine.
Oh, wait, can we do one more 3PO thing? Really, 3PO and R2. I just want to mention that I love that these two were inspired by characters from a Kurosawa film, The Hidden Fortress, which is kind of where I guess Lucas got the idea for like framing this story through the eyes of like the lowest characters.
Yeah.
And they were kind of similar characters to R2 and 3PO, these kind of, bumbling ne'er-do-wells that ended up kind of on the outskirts of amazing things happening.
Yeah, in a way, with the whole saga, it can be seen through the eyes of these two droids, can't it? And they are sort of the common denominator in all the films. The Kurosawa...
Except for Solo.
Except for Solo, yes.
Yes. Well, and also, I feel like watching it in the order we've been watching it, in chronological order, when they show up, you care so much more about them than you did if you were watching it without having seen the past stuff. I mean, they're
that's interesting.
But it's like now we're like, oh, geez, yes, it's C-3PO and R2, and for some reason Obi-Wan Kenobi doesn't recognize them. But that's...
Yeah,
he has to. Of course he does, but
even Solo, though, you could say they don't appear in Solo, but Solo is the story of how Han Solo winds up being at the cantina when the information the droids have brought to Obi-Wan ignites this whole chapter of the saga.
Right.
Solo is about R2-D2 and C-3PO, and I think, although the Kurosawa reference is undeniable and much oft remarked, when I was a kid and older than a kid, I always sort of appreciated R2 and 3PO as this sort of comedy duo, as like a Laurel and Hardy in metal. And I even think that the way I responded to them as a child, I think may have had something to do with my father deciding pretty early on that I would probably like, Laurel and Hardy and Abbott and Costello and so forth. They are a sort of classic comedy duo.
Oh yeah, definitely. Else. Yeah. And they're also, just personally, like, they're the first gay couple I saw on the screen. So
before Bert and Ernie?
Oh, well, on the big screen.
On the big screen.
Yeah.
Fair enough.
And it is a huge testament to the sound people that the sound guys.
Ben Burt represent.
Ben Burt.
That you feel so much for R2-D2, who,
yeah.
I mean, you love him from the second he starts beeping. You love him.
You can tell he is a saucy little bitch from the beginning.
Yes.
You can totally tell.
And you really want him to like you. Like, if you met him, you'd really want him to like you.
Right. But it's kind of like a cat situation where that cat might really like you or might be like, you can just suck it, pal.
And it's also a dog-like situation where he's like, you're not a good person. Everybody thinks you are. You're no good. You're no good.
And I can electrocute you, so just...
Well, yes. You can in some, I don't know. You can sometimes. Sometimes you can also shoot oil and fire out of your butt, but not in this movie.
Oh, that's true. Yes, R2 is not nearly as souped up as he.
Here's the midrashim for that is that Anakin wasn't filling up the fuel for that anymore. No one knew that all that stuff was built into R2, so he couldn't do it. I guess he could have asked someone to.
I guess, but C-3PO at that point was hogging on all the oil for his oil bath.
Well, and also basically at this point, from R2's point of view, C-3PO has severe dementia. I mean, he's had his mind wiped who knows how many times.
True. And R2's probably like, oh my God, okay. I'm tired of telling you this again, but I'm going to tell you one more time.
Yes.
Yeah.
Yeah, they are, in a sense. They are like a couple, one of whom has a very long memory and the other of whom has no memory before just the last few years. And R2 is always babbling about his mission and Obi-Wan Kenobi, and 3PO is like, are you kidding? Time began just now.
I was programming binary load lifters 15 minutes ago.
But who is the dreamer?
Oh. Hey, if anybody but you said that, you'd be ringing a bell right now, I believe.
So let's talk about, can we talk about Luke's hair, please? Can we please just talk about Luke's hair a lot?
Yes, we can talk about it.
I knew this day would come.
So I remember a moment when I realized, and this might have been, I don't know, this might have been early 2000s or late 90s, when I realized that there was a point when Luke's hair was cool when it first came out. Then there was a period when, watching that movie, his hair looked so ludicrous, I could barely keep a straight face. And then it came back around to actually looking pretty good again. So I feel like Luke's hair has had a roller coaster ride.
What do you think about Kylo Ren's hair compared to Luke's hair?
I try not to think about Kylo Ren's hair.
I mean, Luke had some good conditioner too.
That was pretty luscious hair, I gotta say. It looks...
It was all feathered. No,
right.
what
And
is
in that kind of environment, I don't know what kind of product he's using, but he's...
Yes.
Well, this movie does lock in the Star Wars style in many respects, which is still being followed as a template, you know, in the movies they're making now. And there are a lot of hair and facial hair and even to some extent clothing choices in the movie and general design choices that you can identify as having a clear 70s feel to them. Also, because of the 40-year rule that we always most ardently worship the pop culture of 40 years ago. This is Adam Gopnik's theory. The prime site of nostalgia is whatever happened 40 years ago, because people in their 40s tend to be the ones making movies and television shows. And that's true right down the line. You know, in the 60s, everyone was obsessed with the 20s, and the Beatles did all these 20s pastiches, you know. Today, the 80s are the prime site of living memory nostalgia. So anyway, stuff from the 70s also often has a kind of Art Deco 30s vibe to it, and that's true of Star Wars for numerous reasons. But now, you know, not just in a movie like Rogue One, which takes you right up to the doorstep of Episode 4, but in all the Star Wars movies, there's a kind of understanding, anyway, that whatever year Episode 4 takes place in, that's pretty much 1977. So I'm sorry, you're going to have to grow this mustache.
Yeah.
You know, you look at like Poe Dameron's hair, for example. That's a choice based on the fact that the 70s style template was established very clearly in this movie.
I've never even thought about his hair. What does it look like? It looks like Luke's hair, right?
Yeah, pretty much.
It's a little more kempt than Luke's hair.
Yeah.
And
You know, like I might believe that Poe has a stylist, but he has the same basic hair that Luke has.
Well, I mean, Luke lives in a very dry heat, you
right.
know.
Sand gets in everything.
Everything. Everywhere.
When I was a little kid, I was sort of enchanted with Tatooine. I think partly because it's so effectively presented as this sort of universal hometown. You know, it's like the middle of nowhere place where you start off, and it had a kind of echo of home, I think, for me. But it also was a fantasy location that was easy to replicate when you were playing outside, because there were sandboxes, you know, and the beach. You take your Star Wars toys and go play with them in the sandbox, and that was Tatooine. And so it was sort of accessible. It was an understandable alien landscape.
Did you ever take your toys and put them in the freezer and pretend like they were on Hoth?
Mm-hmm. I did that. And I mean, anytime it snowed.
Yeah.
When there was a snow, it would be like, I have my what do you call it? The trench from Hoth. Imperial Attack Base, I think it was called.
That's awesome.
Which it wasn't the Imperial Attack Base, it was the Rebel Trench, but whatever. And it had little things that would blow, you know, an ice bridge off, and so I still have it. I should have dug it out. Well, no, I'll dig it out for Empire Strikes Back. But Hoth was a fun
Spoiler.
Thing. Yeah. Whoa! I do. By the way, let me show you what I brought here. I have an original TIE Fighter.
Oh.
This is from...
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a nice toy.
I don't have it in here, but Noah got me a Chirrut Imwe toy last week.
Oh, wonderful!
Yeah, he's pretty cool.
Let me know when they make a life-size doll.
I will.
Okay.
You'll be the first one I call.
Okay, please do. Please do. So, I mean, I have to say that watching it this time, the scene with Mark Hamill as Luke, looking at the twin suns, like, he really just nails a really simple scene, and it's one of the best scenes in the whole series.
Yes.
It's, you know, it's absolutely wordless, and it's perfectly done. It's perfectly shot. It's perfectly performed. The music that John Williams wrote there is gorgeous.
Yeah.
It's a great moment.
Yeah, it's great. I think Mark Hamill is great. I mean, you know, he certainly was sort of my first, you know, cinematic hero in that sense. And I think he does a very good job. He has to start the movie off as a kind of naive young boy, whiny if you like, but he also has to sort of grow into a compelling enough, convincing enough, swashbuckling hero. I think he's great. And now, okay, so we meet Luke and Owen and Beru. We hear that there's a guy named Ben Kenobi living in the desert who had some connection to Luke's father. One of the droids goes missing, and this scene where we meet, Luke gets attacked by Tusken Raiders, and we meet Obi-Wan, and Luke and Obi-Wan have the entire saga's first serious discussion about the Force and about the history leading up to all this. There's a lot in this. This sort of whole sequence, I would say, from R2's escape to the Luke and Obi-Wan scene. I mean, this is, in a way, the nut of the whole song right here.
So I just throw in here real quick is that when Kenobi gives it's like apparently a crate dragon call that he makes, and there are different ones depending on which special edition you're watching or the original one, but the one that I just watched, which I think is the 2011 one, is nuts.
What are you talking about? Like a sound that he makes?
Yeah, because he scares off the Tusken Raiders with this kind of and in the latest one, it kind of sounds like Baga, the thing that he rode in episode 3, a little bit. But it also has these weird, like, there's kind of like a marching band element to it. It's bizarre.
I don't even remember it. But, I mean, I know what you're talking about. I just don't remember the noise.
Yeah.
But, yes, he, okay, my thing is, and the question I kept asking, Noah, is why was he so cavalier about taking on, a new student, an apprentice? Like, doesn't he remember what happened last time? And isn't he a little kind of like, oh, no, you know what? I'm not going to just jump into this and let this kid, especially because who your dad was, like, why would he want to take him on and teach him how to be a Jedi? The last time he did that, the dude killed everybody.
I think that, well, first of all, he's there to kind of watch over Luke, and I assume that they're waiting for this to happen.
But why?
Because maybe by this point, I'm kind of grasping at straws here, but maybe because they think that this is how Anakin was actually supposed to create balance, was through his son. So we've got to kind of make all these pieces fit together, and eventually he'll kill his dad.
That's kind of my answer too, but I don't know that it's a completely satisfying answer. But it's what came into my head when Amanda brought this up when we were watching it recently. It's like, it's just kind of fate. Like, it's sort of understood that's what Luke is going to do at some point. He's going to join this fight, and Obi-Wan specifically goes to Tatooine to kind of watch over him and keep an eye on him. But
it's strange that clearly they know one another and have hung out a bit, but not until today does he give him really any critical information about his father. It's like, oh, by the way, we've never talked about this, but.
And perhaps in the Obi-Wan series, we will see an 8-year-old Luke Skywalker and the degree to which he and Kenobi interacted during this period. That would be very interesting. Now, you mentioned Obi-Wan, for some reason, waits until this moment to tell Luke a lot of stuff about his father. But when he gets around to doing that...
it's lies! All lies!
and especially your dad wanted you to have this when you were old enough.
Yes.
We've all seen the meme,
right,
where Hayden Christian is screaming, "I hate you, give my lightsaber to my son when he's old enough." I mean...
But I mean, like, we can't pretend like it was just the prequels disagreeing with what Kenobi said, because clearly, even in context of what happens after this, he was lying through his teeth.
But they did make it, didn't they, at the end of when Anakin is being burned up and everything, doesn't Obi-Wan pick up his lightsaber?
Yeah.
And that was a nice nod to, like, okay, we're going to show that he has it.
Right,
That's right.
He definitely gets it. But I mean, I think that Kenobi is, he's hiding the fact that Vader is Luke's father, and he's just going to...
Absolutely.
I am going to lie this kid into the place he needs to be.
Because he wants him to kill his dad, yeah.
Mm-hmm.
This becoming very Harry Potter became very much this. Like,
yeah.
Is the good guy really good, or is he just manipulating everybody to get this thing happening?
Yeah.
In Return of the Jedi, right? The certain point of view conversation. They do realize by that point that they have to straighten some of this out. And in Return of the Jedi, Obi-Wan kind of fudges his answers a little bit and tells Luke, what I told you is true from a certain point of view. Darth Vader did betray and murder your father. Hey, listen, I can take a lie detector test. Get off my case. Another interesting detail, and I think we know the true answer to this, which is, George Lucas didn't actually have the whole saga figured out when he made this movie, and he later retrofit. Nothing wrong with that. That's what creative people do. But Kenobi clearly gives Luke the impression, or plays along with the existing impression, that Luke's father and Uncle Owen grew up together and had differing opinions about whether it was a good idea to get involved in rebellion.
Yeah, because Owen wanted him to stay there and be a slave.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Right, and not gotten involved.
Not get involved. You just stay and obey that little flapping, floating helium balloon.
Yeah. Oh, and even in the Owen and Beru scene at the breakfast table, he has too much of his father in him. That's what I'm afraid.
Yeah, his father, who we met for 15 minutes, and
But she's like, when she says it, she's like, "Oh, he's got too much of his father in him," and you're like, "No, damn it, it's Anakin. Like, you don't."
He's gonna be killing baby Tuskens before you know it.
This is so cute.
It's almost as though at the time this movie was created, in George Lucas's mind, Anakin Skywalker and Darth Vader were two different people.
Almost.
I don't think that's actually the case. I do think that it was supposed to be more like Anakin had the similar story from Luke to begin. Because I think, like, after the premiere of Star Wars, when there was like a press conference or something before nerd lore was disseminated instantly, he wanted to see how far things got, and someone said, "So who is this Darth Vader guy anyway?" And he said, "He's Luke's father." And they didn't get any...
I read about this recently. I always thought that too, but it turns out...
Spoiler.
Yes.
Spoiler alert.
You've not seen the next film in the sequence.
It was actually David Prowse who said that in an interview.
Oh, it was David Prowse that said that.
Yeah. And I guess it's not clear whether he said that because he knew that to be the case or
because he's a little nuts.
He is, and also apparently felt very betrayed, expected to hear his own voice in the movie.
He was betrayed and killed.
Is betrayed and murdered, yes. So David Prowse did have a bit of a bone to pick with George Lucas, and I think that did lead to a breach between them. Yeah, I think, at some point between the release of Episode 4 and the creation of Episode 5, a lot of stuff got locked in terms of who was who and what the backstory was. That was at most ambiguous in Episode 4.
So I just want to say that I would like to see a version of Return of the Jedi that has, in place of Jabba, has a kind of slovenly, befurred Irish guy on that.
You're talking about the stand-in who...
So when they added Jabba to, there was the scene filmed with a guy walking around and talking to Harrison Ford and saying, "Han, I just can't afford to," and then they meant to put an animatronic, a claymation creature over that, and it just didn't work, so they dropped the scene. And then they later went in and added that Jabba, but we've still got the footage of this guy that was playing the stand-in.
Yeah.
And I just want to see Return of the Jedi with that guy as Jabba.
Just put him in there.
Yeah. Just let him go.
Keep Salacious Crumb the same.
Yeah. Well, attach him to Carrie Fisher with a bikini on. I mean.
Right. And then watch her choke him. It'll be great.
Yes, it'll be great.
That is...
He'd be there if it's good.
That is the next episode in this film, getting to the cantina and meeting Han and Chewie. But before we get there, I just want to mention how gruesome it is when Luke returns home and
so scary.
Boy, that definitely hit me when I was a little kid. But even now, trying to watch it with fresh eyes, oh my God, just seeing smoke coming out of the house would have been enough. But we see Owen and Beru, they're ravaged skeletons
terrible.
flaming on the front lawn.
I feel like that barely affected me as a kid. I didn't really notice it. I mean, I noticed what it was, but I thought it was, you know, like, ooh, they killed them, that's bad. But it didn't really frighten me. And watching it now, I feel like it is, like, really gruesome and unsettling.
Yeah.
It's too much.
Mhm.
Nothing else goes that far in those movies. Nothing else is that real.
It is.
And
Yeah.
it's too much, and it's still scary, and it's horribly upsetting to see their skeletons. Because, I mean, freaking stormtroopers don't even bleed.
It goes by very quickly, you know, and it's not a close shot, but it's just enough to be disturbing. And yes, you're right. It's that kind of gore is fairly uncommon in these movies.
It is. And also, this is one of the few cases where I experience a Mandela effect with Star Wars.
Uh-huh.
I remember them sitting in chairs with their hands on coffee mugs. The skeletons were like sitting at a table, and they had coffee mugs in their hands and were burned. That's what I very clearly remember from when I saw it as a kid. But
Wow.
I don't. That seems not to be the case.
I just remember watching it and thinking that can't really be what that is. That can't be what that is. Like, they wouldn't have done that. And then the more you watch it, like, then they show it, they cut away, and then they show it again. And the second that time they show it, you're like, oh, there's no question of what that is. And I'm thinking, this couldn't possibly be this. They wouldn't have done it. I was a scared child.
Well, having accomplished that plot detail, now there's nothing keeping Luke on Tatooine. He's going to go with Obi-Wan to Alderaan. More than that, he's going to learn the ways of the Force and become a Jedi like his father. And you see Obi-Wan in his head go, oh, I'm going to have to straighten this out someday. Then they go to Mos Eisley, about which Obi-Wan also memorably informs us, you will never find a more wretched hive of scum and villainy.
Do I get to do this again? Ding, 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 ding.
Yes, he does sound like George Harrison, almost exactly.
So I feel like if we're thinking of continuity here, it seems like he was like, hey, Chewbacca, can you meet me at the cantina? Because Yoda told me you'd be here when I needed you. I need a ship.
Yeah. Yeah, the cantina scene, I mean, it gives us our first glimpses of Han and Chewie. It's also the first kind of, it's the first Star Wars set piece, isn't it? The first, like, here's our location. There's a lot of these in the films. Here's an exotic location packed with exotic characters. It's very reminiscent of other filmic watering holes, like Rick's Cafe in Casablanca is, I think, the clearest reference being made here.
But I mean, I think it's definitely like the threshold that Luke is being pushed across. You know, it's like everything prior to that was like kind of either junky or really crisp and clean. And he had this kind of boring life. And then all of a sudden there are like all these colorful characters and it's too much to deal with for him.
Definitely. It's like it's a kid moving to the big city, you know?
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and going to a bar for the first time. You know, like that's...
Right.
They won't let his friends in.
Yeah, being around types of creatures he's never seen before. Like, you know, he knows what the sand people are like, you know?
Right.
You know, but these guys, he has no idea. And what the hell's wrong with this guy who says he's going to kill me, you know? I just walked in the bar.
Unrelated to anything, but today I watched some of the deleted scenes from this movie. And there was a scene from Tashi Station, which I think I'd read the script of that scene, but had never seen it.
With Luke and his friends?
Yeah. And for some reason, I got this, in the pit of my stomach, I got this, I should not be watching this. Like, you know, like, if you're like, 6 years old or something and you see porn and you're like, I'm not supposed to watch this yet. I got that feeling like this was illicit material I'm not supposed to be watching because I've heard so much about Tashi Station but never actually seen it. And I felt like I was going to be punished.
It's very American Graffiti, isn't it?
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
I think it was because of this movie that, my parents always told me, like, someday when you're older, you're going to go to a bar for the first time and make sure you bring an elderly friend in a bathrobe.
Oh, okay.
Sorry.
Because my parents actually did send me to bars with elderly friends in bathrobes. No one else would take them to the bar. And, once you take their IV off, they can get to the bar.
But he also, this is not the first time Obi-Wan's been in a bar. and saved someone else's life.
True.
Right. And by cutting off an arm.
Exactly.
Mm-hmm.
Well, they all cut their arms off.
This severed arm is uncharacteristically bloody for a Star Wars, for a lightsaber wound. I think this is the only time that ever happens. A lightsaber draws visible blood.
Because usually it cauterizes the wound, I think, but maybe it's a species. I mean, who knows?
Well, you see, I'm guessing what the explanation for that is that's Dr. Evazan and Ponda Baba are the characters that attack him. Previously seen in Rogue One recently. The guy with the messed up face is a mad scientist who does all kinds of genetic manipulation stuff. So I'm guessing that he's got some kind of special blood that, you know.
Maybe he's got very thin blood. He's on blood thinners or...
Well, when the lightsaber extends, it really cauterizes.
Moving on.
Yeah, all right.
Let's go on as though nothing happened. Okay, so Chewbacca here is the first mate on a ship that might suit us. And here we go. Han Solo's first line is, "I'm Han Solo, Captain of the Millennium Falcon." I think in the special edition of this, you know, many of the aliens in the cantina are just slightly cooler. But because of that, I sort of had in my mind a lot of the shots that I had come to accept as special edition shots actually are in the original movie. The close-ups of the band playing and things like that. The original is pretty much there. It's just a couple of the aliens get replaced. And of course, in the Han and Greedo confrontation, there's a big difference. I was surprised upon recently rewatching the original version of the cantina scene that Han shoots first is not really accurate either. Originally, Han was the only one who shoots. Greedo did not shoot Han in the original movie. Han just shoots Greedo after his line. I'll bet you would. Han shoots, period. In the special edition, originally, a shot was added for Greedo in which he impossibly misses Han first, and then Han shoots him. In more recent special edition versions, I think it's basically simultaneous.
Well, I watched a sequence of them, and there are a couple where Han does this weird, awkward duck out of the way thing to miss the laser bolt. And I think the most recent one does have Greedo shooting first and missing, but Han hitting him, and it's a much quicker thing than any of the previous. I don't know. To be honest, I care so little about who shot first in this scene.
It's so much about making Greedo shoot at all or shoot first. It's so much about, you know, we can't have a hero who just arbitrarily kills people. Because heroes don't kill people. Heroes try to save people who then unfortunately fall off the building or get shot in some other way. Like they don't ever really kill people. And so I think this is probably, you know, Han couldn't have just shot this guy.
Yeah, I can see in his profession him just shooting this guy, and I can accept that, you know. But I don't care enough to complain about it if it's changed. I just don't care.
Yeah, I can.
You know,
agree with that.
I think it's stupid that they changed it, and it does bother me a little bit.
Yeah.
Because of the motivation that I think there's behind it. But I'm not gonna get in a fight with somebody or wear a shirt.
Yeah, if I were a collaborator of George Lucas's and he asked me what I thought, hey, I'm going to change this in this way, I would say, what's the point? Who cares? Han Solo is hardly the first anti-hero in movie history.
I see. I just kind of want to see more ridiculous changes made. Like, let's make it so Luke and Leia don't kiss. Digitally altered. Right. They try to kiss, but they miss or something. We'll figure it out.
They do kiss, but it's awkward. They don't enjoy it.
There's a sheet between them.
It feels wrong. I was thinking in the new Rise of Skywalker trailer, the way it begins with clips of the original trilogy and then clips of the prequels. And the clips are all very carefully and well chosen. But wouldn't it be funny if the prequel clips were just all the things that people don't like? It was like a shot of Jar Jar, a shot of the midichlorians line, a shot of...
that two-headed announcer at the pod race.
Yes. Just trolling people,
We could make this trailer. You know?
We could make this. That would be wonderful.
Can we talk about Leia's accent?
Yes, talk about it.
So I mean, I feel like for the longest time growing up, I think a lot of us kind of, made fun of the way that she kind of dropped in and out of this vaguely British accent. And in her books, she's explained that she was kind of just on break from acting school in England, and that was just the way she was being coached to act, and so it just kind of naturally came out that way.
The retconned explanation has been that maybe she's speaking in a sort of diplomatic tone, the way Queen Amidala does in episode 1.
Right, but not quite as kabuki-ish.
Carrie Fisher, of course, is one of the most important members of the team here, and an inspiration to all. At the time this movie was released, I think it was considered rather advanced and forward-thinking that there was that the princess character, rather than just being this damsel in distress or this prize to be won, was a fighter. She was the leader of the rebellion. She was in some ways braver and more proficient at daring do than Han and Luke were. She was sassy and spunky and all those words, and that's great. And Carrie Fisher, of course, was very able to imbue her with a sense of humor and a certain fire and passion. However, now Hollywood and culture has grown up so much in this regard. It now feels kind of like, yeah, but there's only one important female character, and she is the princess, and it's gone from seeming ahead of its time to seeming a little dated in this respect. Amanda, you're a woman. When you were young and experienced this movie, how did you feel about this? Was Princess Leia an exceptional role model type to you? Did you think about gender?
No, it didn't occur to me. It never occurred to me to think about it. Yeah, no, I don't ever remember thinking like, this is great. She's doing something that nobody else does that I watch. It just never occurred to me that there was a difference between her and, say, like Gandhi, or and if I was watching it.
Gandhi wouldn't shoot the blast doors. Gandhi wouldn't shoot anything.
Gandhi wouldn't shoot it. He did not shoot first.
Right, Gandhi did not shoot.
He could rock that hairstyle, though, couldn't he?
Yeah, I don't remember feeling.
One of the things that I noticed about that was if we were playing Star Wars in the neighborhood, any girls that were playing, it would be like they would fight for who would get Princess Leia, and then someone else would have to be Aunt Beru.
Yes.
And if you got to be Aunt Beru, you've got your milk, and that's about it.
You're pouring people stuff, and that's it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm. So I think that's a sad thing for
putting bok choy in some sort of steamer. Yeah, there isn't another important female, is there?
No.
Not in this film. In the whole original trilogy, I mean, Mon Mothma is an important figure, but she doesn't really have anything interesting to do in Return of the Jedi,
Right.
She doesn't really have an interesting role. And the prequels were a chance to get this right, and it didn't quite happen. The prequels, in the very supporting cast, there are some other compelling female characters, but it's basically Padme.
Mm-hmm.
We were reading last night in that Chris Taylor book that there was a draft of this movie where Lucas sort of tried the idea of making Luke a female protagonist, much, it seems, the way Rey wound up being the protagonist of the new trilogy. And that's not what
even
happened.
Some of Rey's original designs were kind of based on that period of what Luke was looking like if Luke was a girl.
Yeah. And it would have worked. I mean, it is actually, it's undeniable that the idea of the female protagonist in the fairy tale or quest adventure story, that does have a rich tradition. I mean, if Lucas had made Luke a female hero, you could draw a line from The Wizard of Oz, Alice in Wonderland, all those fairy tales. But it's not what happened. But certainly Carrie Fisher's Princess Leia is a kind of, iconic and an example where I think the performer made the role deeper and more interesting than it ever would have been, and influenced the way it was written.
Yeah, I mean, she did script doctoring on this film, right? I think she.
Oh, is that right?
From my understanding, at least at some point when she was on set with Star Wars, she was kind of doing script doctoring along the way. So,
I wouldn't.
Oh, was it you who said that told the story of the father saying, "How am I supposed to explain to my son?"
Oh, yeah. Yeah, I read that somewhere.
And Carrie Fisher said, "Tell him that this guy put me in a bikini and I didn't like it, so I choked him."
Yeah.
Mm-hmm. Yeah,
really,
beautiful.
Really beautiful.
Yeah. I mean, Carrie Fisher, of course, partly because of Star Wars, but for lots of other reasons too.
Yes.
We love her, and yeah, it's great. It's great that the Star Wars, the female character in the original Star Wars movies was played by this, kind of amazing person, and particularly this very funny, sarcastic, caustic sort of, of course she's Hollywood royalty, but she also is kind of a Dorothy Parker-like figure in terms of her caustic wit, and it's great that wit has been a part of the Star Wars thing from the beginning. Mm-hmm. In the DVD versions of the original trilogy that we have, Carrie Fisher is on the commentary, and she's hilarious, and
of course she is.
It's much better than just hearing your average actress talk about her work in your average adventure movie.
Mm-hmm. I love her novels too. Like they're great reads. It's like sitting down and having Carrie Fisher tell you a story with all of the smarm involved.
Yeah, she's terrific, and of course, much missed these days. So the movie progresses along its adventure story. It seemed to me while watching it recently that there are a few ways in which this movie feels different from all the other Star Wars movies. One of them is that it always seems to be showing you as little as possible, partly because we know George Lucas was holding this thing together with two hands, mm-hmm. and couldn't linger too long on any special effect because it was so rickety the way it was improvised and the way they were stretching their budget. So the very fast pace of the editing, of which Marcia Lucas, then wife of George Lucas, but also a very accomplished film director who worked on lots of Scorsese movies and everything else. The editing is one of the things that you can say that's why this works. But it has to do with cutting away from things very quickly, giving you a quick sense of what's swimming around in the water in the garbage masher. But
it's a Dianoga, that's what that's called.
Thank you.
The Dianoga. I can add to that. So I guess in between takes, at one point, Mark Hamill found some kind of goop on his armor and went over to Lucas and said, "Is this Dianoga poo poo?"
If I said that, Marc-Anthony, you would both just stare at me for 5 minutes. That was scary when I was a kid, the trash compactor scene. Boy,
that's one that I remember reenacting a lot with friends.
Would you get between two mattresses or something?
No, well, I mean, the one place I'm recalling right now is a kind of a stairway down to a basement, but it was close enough that we could kind of push against the other side with our feet and pretend that we were in the garbage masher.
One of the big laughs in the movie, the first times you see it, is 3PO misinterpreting their cheers as screams.
Yes.
They're dying, R2. That used to always be good for a laugh before it was so familiar.
Also, this is one of the very few meaningless and useless numbers that I have memorized. 3263827 is the serial number on that garbage masher. I'll never forget that. I can't remember where I put my keys, but I know that.
Yeah. Is that your password for?
On everything, yeah.
Yeah, everything, right?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. I thought, in addition to the sort of the way this movie lets your imagination fill in the gaps, maybe a little more than the other Star Wars movies. I also think more than the others, this one feels like a sort of classic Hollywood film in a way that the others don't. I think maybe because it is more of a classic Hollywood film than the others. I mean, this movie seems like it belongs in the conversation with The Wizard of Oz and, Cecil B. DeMille epics and the Errol Flynn Robin Hood and sort of swashbuckling films of the past. It's one of those. In a way, it feels in some ways like the last gasp of the studio era, even though that's not the story of how it was made. The story of how it was made is very much about an indie film being made according to a personal vision.
Yeah, and really of making a lot with quite a little.
Yeah. And yet, far more than the other films, which build on the mythology established here, it feels like a classic Hollywood movie.
Yeah, I think I agree with that. Yeah. Can I just say, I think Run, Luke, Run, also a great band name.
Run, Luke, Run. I thought occasionally watching Harrison Ford's performance that Alden Ehrenreich, who played Han Solo in Solo, I don't know what it was because I watched a little bit of episode 4 for our Solo discussion too. But this time I thought, I saw a little more of Ehrenreich's choices in Harrison Ford's performance here. And there were things he did that I don't know, for some reason I'd never noticed before. I never made the connection before. But I thought, he used that moment to build that other moment in Solo.
Yeah, I felt a bit of that too. I'm guessing that performance is going to grow on me the more times I watch Solo, but I was never that upset with it to begin with.
The presence of Han Solo throughout this whole Death Star sequence really does, as we've often said sometimes it's been said, the prequels could have used a sarcastic audience surrogate character to kind of undermine the heavy portents of everything that's happening. This movie is really the model for that. As all this is happening, Han Solo is just tossing off hilarious one-liners all evening. It was a boring conversation anyway.
Right. Watching some of the bloopers, it seems that he was riffing a lot.
Was he?
When they were filming, and there was a few things where I'm like, man, I kind of wish that would have stayed. Like, Luke's trying to talk him into rescuing the princess, and he's like, she's rich, she's beautiful, and he's like, yeah, so's life. There's some good bits.
I've got to take another look at some of those. The lightsaber duel between Darth Vader, or as Obi-Wan calls him, Darth, and Obi-Wan Kenobi takes place here. This is another one where it's as much about how it used to make me feel as anything else. This used to be scary to me, and Obi-Wan's death or whatever happens to him was a major emotional, crest of the movie. Now it is, of course, very primitive compared to subsequent lightsaber duels. It's strange to me that as long as Lucas was fixing things in the special edition, he left in that stiff, empty robe.
You think that could have been updated? I kind of expect we may see that changed at some point.
It's an obvious...
it's just kind of awkward, and it could certainly be improved upon. But yeah, this is the wimpiest lightsaber duel, which is kind of sad considering that it should be this, like, they're finally having their battle.
Yeah, 20 years ago, these guys were leaping through the air.
They were cutting off each other's limbs.
Yeah. And now it's just...
Alec Guinness doesn't look like he's doing very well.
My understanding is that he didn't really want to do Star Wars that bad. And afterwards was kind of annoyed with some of the attention we got for it. And was kind of rude to a fair amount of kids that came up and were like, Obi-Wan Kenobi, and he was like, go watch Bridge Over the River Kwai and leave me alone.
Yeah, there are letters where he sort of, writing to his friends, where he sort of gently but pointedly mocks the movie and the dialogue he was given. But he also says, this will keep me on my feet so I can do some theater. And, he clearly, it was a strategic career move for him. He is wonderful. I mean, Alec Guinness is every line reading is memorable, and just as it was supposed to. His presence gives the whole thing authority and gravitas, and he's good. But he dies, or at least loses this duel, and our heroes flee the Death Star in the Millennium Falcon.
Truth.
This is what happens.
You're not going to debate me on this point, are you?
No, that is actually what happened. Yeah, and here's a thing that's always kind of bothered me, or at least I remember, being an 11-year-old and watching the VHS and saying, why didn't they just quickly stop off on some other planet? They knew they're being tracked. Just switch ships.
Yeah. Why indeed?
They didn't have time, and where were they going to get a ship?
Yeah.
Like it took a whole card game for time to get the first ship.
Yeah. Okay. Fair enough.
So all of this takes us we wind up at the Rebel base, a location revisited later on in Rogue One.
Right. The fourth moon of Yavin.
Exactly. I always get my moons of Yavin confused. What's that?
It's that they're in the Masasi Temple, which was apparently an early Jedi temple.
An early temple that is now being used as a sort of hangar for the Rebel fleet.
I would expect we might see the Moon of Yavin in episode 9.
I think that's
I'd be
probably
surprised if we don't.
Yeah.
And I guess technically it could be the Jedi or the Death Star ruins could be on Yavin and not Endor.
Right. Why not? Yeah. I guess. We have our scene with Biggs Darklighter. This is a sort of. So there was originally a scene between Luke and Biggs.
Several scenes, really. There were a few of them.
Yeah, back on Tatooine.
Right.
In which we were going to learn all about how Biggs has already joined the academy and is having all these adventures.
And he's going to jump ship and join the rebellion.
He's right. The academy they're talking about is the Imperial Academy.
Imperial Academy, but he's been talking to some people, and he's going to get on the ship called the Rand Ecliptic and escape and join the rebellion, which clearly he does in a matter of a couple of days, I guess.
Yeah. And yet it makes it a little richer, because in the early part of the movie, Luke does have a line where he says, "Biggs is right. I'm never going to get out of here," or something like that.
And that's what you said since, that was the same thing when Biggs and Tank left. He says that too. So
yeah. So and at that point, you don't know who he's talking about unless you know. But I mean, on first viewing, you don't know what he's talking about. But then here in this scene, we meet Biggs, and it just adds a little richness to it.
Although it does make it a little weird that his best friend dies in this battle, and afterwards he's like, I'm just going to go happily hug my friends. Everything's great.
Yeah. Well, it's also been pointed out that Leia is called upon to console Luke after Obi-Wan dies, but her whole planet just got...
Yeah. I mean, that the hermit guy you talk to tops once every 3 months.
Yeah.
And yeah, her whole planet, her father, everyone.
The destruction of Alderaan, that is a sequence, it happens fairly quickly.
Mm-hmm.
Nicely acted by Peter Cushing, the real Peter Cushing, and Carrie Fisher, and the Prowse/Jones collaboration that created Darth Vader. But yeah, whole planet. There's a Holocaust or two for you.
And this is one of the situations where I think it's. Well, maybe people would disagree with me, but I think the explosion of Alderaan in the special editions looks much better than the original Christmas.
It does. Yeah, I think so too. Yeah, no doubt about that. And that's an example, you're not really adding something to the movie. You're just fixing something up a little.
Right.
Doing it the way you would have done it then if you could have. Yeah, so anyway, so now we have what turns out to be our first encounter with Biggs. As Luke prepares to participate in this dogfight to attack the tiny weakness in the giant Death Star. Han is taking his reward and leaving. I guess that's what you're best at. That's telling him. Take care of yourself, Han. I guess that's what you're best at.
It's pretty snippy.
It is snippy. But
it was pointed, and it actually... that barb hit its mark.
He's not wrong.
No.
And there's so many wonderful acting moments too. I mean, it is really true that this material was not necessarily going to create such engaging scene work. And one of the reasons it does is because these principal performers are so good. Harrison Ford is particularly good at communicating things without talking. And in that scene where Luke is telling him awful gently and he's going, I know what I'm doing. And Chewbacca clearly is not happy about this. You know, Harrison Ford communicates so much. You see he knows right from wrong. You see the conflict in him, you know, as this is unfolding. Also, there's a really nice scene on the Millennium Falcon where Han and Leia have a little argument, and then Luke comes in and sits down. And so Luke and Han are both nurturing their little crushes on Leia at this point. And Luke says, you know, what do you think of her? And they talk about her a little bit.
I'm trying not to, kid.
I'm trying not to, kid. Han says, you think a princess and a guy like me? And
Yeah.
Luke jealously cuts him off. No. And then cut back to Harrison Ford, and he has this kind of amused, world-weary grin on his face. And you get so much about
It's
this
adorable.
It's adorable.
It is. It's
And their
totally adorable.
relationship, you get that they're friends. Han likes Luke, you know, and for all his, you know, hardness and sarcasm, he takes good care of Luke throughout this movie until he comes back at the end, of course. But until this departure, you know, when they're about to jump into the garbage masher, Han has the stormtroopers held. He says, get in there, you know, I've got you. And then in this moment, he's obviously sort of amused by the younger man's crush on Leia. And, you know, Han, in spite of himself, he develops affection almost immediately for these new friends.
Yes. It's
New
super
friend.
sweet. BFFs.
Okay, so Death Star trench run, climactic dogfight in space.
I think this, first of all, this is another situation where I really think that the special editions have improved on what was originally there. The space battles, particularly in this movie, suffered from some effects problems with the original theatrical release. But also, even though it's very simple in a lot of ways, this is just such an effective climax for this story. The tension is built right in, and Williams' score is great.
Absolutely. Yeah, I mean, it's totally effective, properly recalls like dogfights in old war movies, but it has this visual design to it that is breathtaking and in 1977 completely unheard of.
And really complicated sound design. I think that was Ben Burtt doing that sound design, and it's a great thing. I mean, it's confusing and understandable at the same time. It's fantastic.
Isn't this where they took the World War II footage and they copied it frame for frame, and that's how they showed it to George Lucas the first time?
Yeah, I think it's how Lucas showed it to his collaborators, and when he was, you know, he assembled the dogfight using footage from World War II movies. You know, the way he would have done an animatic for one of the later films. You know, that's how he communicated his vision for what it should be. Yeah, it's totally affecting. It is interesting how each successive film in the series would expand upon what the Force can do. And, you know, in this movie, we see Obi-Wan get struck down, but his cloak is empty, and he said something about becoming more powerful than ever. And now we find he can speak to Luke from beyond, and Luke hears his voice. Of course, in Empire Strikes Back, Luke can see him too. And, you know, we keep building on this idea. But for now, it's just Luke in his X-Wing being told by the voice of Obi-Wan to trust his feelings. So he turns off his targeting computer. And it turns out that's the ticket.
I think that's the best.
Turn off his targeting computer.
I'm okay.
Yeah. But I mean, I think that for me, that's the most important scene in the movie. It's really that, you know, getting down to Star Wars being a, you know, fiction about our relationship with technology, and he's got his friends R2 and 3PO that can sometimes be helpful, but also computers can get in the way sometimes. You got to do things on your own.
Yeah, technology will only get you so far.
And Vader is more machine than man. He's become corrupted by machinery.
Do you think he's really hearing Obi-Wan, or do you think he's hearing in his head what Obi-Wan said? Or is that the same thing? I mean, Do you think he's really hearing something new from Obi-Wan at that point, or do you think it's just?
Yeah,
But I think Obi-Wan directly communicating to him from, Forceville.
Yeah, I think it's the first example, the first use of a Force ghost in the saga. It's just that we don't see him; we only hear him. But yeah, I always accepted it as Obi-Wan continuing to train Luke. And Han Solo makes the surprise reappearance, blasts Darth Vader out of the sky. Vader goes spinning off into an uncertain fate, freeing Luke up to blow this thing and let's go home. And listen, no medal for the Wookiee.
I'm still butthurt about that shit.
There are so many bingos I did not write down. No medal for the Wookiee.
Yeah.
It's really just insulting on every, like, they make him walk up there even, like, if
I know.
He does get the last line of the movie.
When Han walks up and he's all like, it's just not like anything like Han before. There's not, that is ridiculous the way Harrison Ford walks up to get his little necklace.
A little pleased with himself.
Yes, he's all like,
yeah, everybody's gotten a shampoo.
Yes, yes, including Chewbacca.
Mm-hmm.
Yes.
And a brushing, they brushed him.
Yeah, the droids are all shiny and all very nice. And that's it. Then we get the credits and the music. And I wonder if there'll ever be any more of these movies, we all thought to ourselves.
One thing I've been thinking about while watching this is that while we often will talk about how this was, at the time, the biggest grossing movie ever, right? I think that it outgrossed.
It beat Jaws, and then it was overtaken by E.T., and then they kept trading. Spielberg and Lucas kept going back and forth.
But I think one of the differences with this movie's earnings is that it wasn't necessarily that so many people went to see it. It was that some people went to see it like 30 times.
Right.
Apparently that was a factor, yeah.
Yeah, it was a lot of people just watching and rewatching it. The general public maybe saw it once each, But,
well, it does seem to be true that with the exception of George Lucas and maybe some of his collaborators, nobody expected this movie to be a big success. Certainly 20th Century Fox was not planning much of a rollout for it. And it opened in, I think, fewer than 50 theaters. And in fact, at the same time, 20th Century Fox was releasing The Other Side of Midnight, a drama based on the novel by Sidney Sheldon. And that was their big movie that summer. They, in fact, required certain theaters, like, you can't have the print of The Other Side of Midnight unless you also agree to run Star Wars. Of course, they very quickly realized they had severely miscalculated. And Star Wars was beating box office records for films that opened on hundreds of screens. It was, of course, a gigantic phenomenon.
They didn't have enough prints. Like, they said they were like pumping out prints as fast as they could because they hadn't sent them anywhere, and suddenly everybody was saying, "You have to send us this." And we didn't make enough. We made like 10. Yeah,
and within weeks of its release, Fox had to reverse their original policy. Yes, you can have Star Wars, but you've also got to show The Other Side of Midnight.
Yes. I lost my train of thought.
And so it was. Then suddenly we lived in a Star Wars world, and we have lived in it ever since.
This is a problem with being a nerd, in a sense, is that I have to wonder, does Star Wars as a movie exist in the Star Trek universe? Can Captain Picard, computer, play episode 4, A New Hope?
Well, it is interesting.
That's not what space is really like.
Yes. Or they're like, you're looking at now. Everything that's happening now is happening now.
There's no Star Wars in Star Trek universe, just Spaceballs.
Yeah, that's the real one, yes. We may be living in a world soon with 2 rival streaming series, one called Picard and one called Kenobi.
As long as there's never a crossover, I'm fine with both.
Wow. Yeah. Crossover would just be, it would be terrible.
Please, no. Please just don't.
No, among other things, it would require some time travel bullshit that nobody wants to deal with.
Which is what I'm still afraid of with the Skywalker, Rise of Skywalker. If you time travel J.J. Abrams.
I know. You know, it's just this Deus Ex Machina that he just doesn't think anybody's going to notice. He doesn't have any solution except for that.
For those of you just joining us, if this is your first Faces of Stone, you might want to know that Amanda has complicated feelings about J.J. Abrams because she was a big fan of Felicity and didn't like the way that series ended.
It just didn't make sense. She was in purgatory the whole time.
Felicity is in this movie, though, right?
Oh, yes, that's right. Carrie Russell, who played Felicity in Felicity.
And, halfway through the movie, she gets a really weird haircut that the audience will not react well to.
Right.
Nothing new under the sun. Well, how do we sum this up? There are a few films that have been more influential on my life than Star Wars Episode 4, and if I were not doing this series with you guys right now, there is still every chance that I would have revisited this film. Amanda and I tend to watch all the Star Wars movies now and then, just go through them. But I think A New Hope, I've always sort of taken it for granted in a way. It's one I can half pay attention to because I know it so well. But in the last week, I've really found that paying close attention to it and trying to put yourself back in the original headspace in which we received it reveals a better and more special movie than I remembered it being. It is absolutely deserves its reputation as a movie that changed the world.
I have nothing to add to that. That's a great summary.
Yeah, I think it's what you were saying. It's really interesting to think about, Albert, that, to live in a Star Wars free universe, and suddenly we weren't, and we didn't realize what that meant.
Mm-hmm.
We didn't realize this was going to be something we're talking about on this thing, because we can't wait for another one of the movies to come out, and it's crazy. But I will say that the one bingo that nobody said tonight that I was really hoping would be said is
yes. Yeah, it is. I didn't say that in the last hour and a half, but I did think about the Vader sessions once or twice while rewatching this.
Definitely.
Hard not to.
Definitely.
Well, closing thoughts, anybody? Going once? All right.
I think I'm good.
Wait, let's talk about next time.
Oh, yeah, okay. What is next time? Next time is holiday special and other
that's right.
material.
Is it?
Yes. 2 weeks from tonight on Faces of Stone, that will be our September 15th episode, is one of our special theme episodes in which we depart from the chronology of the saga to focus in on something specific. This episode will be called Happy Life Day, the Star Wars Holiday Special, and other special things.
And just be prepared, because the first 20 minutes of that episode will be entirely in Wookiee.
We're just going to have our cats walk around.
Just get ready for that.
And then after about 20 minutes, we'll come in and Diane Carroll will come in and sing to the cats. Who's hosting this next time?
Oh, surely you needn't ask. It is.
Yeah.
It could only be Marc-Anthony Macon.
I cannot wait. I'm also going to talk about the Ewok Adventures.
The Ewok Adventures.
The second of which, so first of all, just to throw this out there, in the new trailer, you see an Ugnaught riding a creature. That is a blurg, which was originally seen in Ewoks: The Battle for Endor.
So Disney is
with Wilford Brimley.
Right. Right.
And C.N. Phillips. So it'll be a fun ride.
Well, we are all certainly looking forward to that. That's 2 weeks from tonight.
And if you haven't seen the Christmas special, watch it, because there's going to be spoilers.
Yes, definitely. Please go ahead and watch it. There are a few
Try
different
to watch it.
versions
Go
online.
easy on yourself. We forgive you if you watch 5 seconds of it and simply can't go on.
I judge you if you can't get through that. How can you get through life?
I liked it better than I liked Solo.
Well, I like it's pretty much my second favorite Star Wars thing. So.
All right.
It is certainly something, and we will talk about it in 2 weeks. After that, we go back to the regular chronology, talk about Empire Strikes Back, and we will just keep doing this until The Rise of Skywalker. I think 2 days after the film comes out is our final episode in this series, in which we will finally talk about Episode 9.
Woo!
We have a long way to go before then, and we hope you will stay with us. You can find our complete schedule and lots of information, as well as our previous series of conversations about Twin Peaks: The Return, at our website, facesofstone.space. And if you want to find us, you can find us on all the various socials. Just Google our names or something. On Twitter, just for the hell of it, we are M_A_Macon, president of Sisk, and Noah Diamond. All right, folks. We'll see you next time on Faces of Stone.